Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love. A man who is a regular of this program, I'm very pleased to say, and one of our favorite guests, is, well, a man of many parts. His name is Charles Sam Faddis. He has served, among other things, as an Army officer, as a career undercover CIA operative. He's been a candidate for Congress. He's an author. He's also a member of our Committee on the Present Danger, China. And last but hardly least, he is the driving force behind an absolutely terrific online resource and magazine now available on Substack. Sam, it's great to have you back. Welcome.
Great to be here as always, Frank. Thank you very much.
I'm anxious to talk with you about so many things, and we'll have a limited time to do it. So let's move smartly through as many as we can, starting with Ukraine. Give us, if you would, just a situation report.
Well, I think the reality is this. Vladimir Putin had this fantasy in his mind. He was going to stage what amounts to a Russian blitzkrieg, right? He was going to take the capital city. This was all going to be over in a couple, 3 days. He was going to install a puppet government. The rest of the world, by the time they woke up and focused on this, it would be a fait accompli. They would more or less accept the reality that he had imposed. That didn't work. That's not going to work. He's now stuck 2 weeks in sort of a meat grinder of an operation. He may yet still win. He's using incredible amounts of power. But I think personally, this gives us an opportunity to provide him an off-ramp and negotiate a solution. I think the Russians trotted out a few days ago, basically some starting conditions for negotiations, which I wouldn't suggest we should have accepted on their face, but I think we're pretty reasonable as a starting point. I think basically Putin would love to get out of this adventure at this point.
This misadventure, one might call it. Give us a sense of where you think those off-ramps would be and what it would involve other than pretty much the abject surrender of the Ukrainians.
Well, basically what Putin said is, I want you to amend your constitution so that you never join an alliance. That's code for, I need some kind of commitment that you're not going to join NATO. And then he said, I need you to tell me that you're going to admit that Crimea belongs to Russia and these two so-called people's republics along the border between Russia and Ukraine are independent. Okay, so let's leave aside modifying the Constitution. We can probably find a way to assure Putin that Ukraine doesn't join NATO because in reality, Ukraine is never going to join NATO. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to do that. And the Ukrainians are never going to take back Crimea. So admitting that it belongs to Russia will gall them. I get it, but it does not alter the reality on the ground. And honestly, they're never going to take back these two so-called people's republics. Again, galling. And I'm not suggesting that Putin has been justified in everything he's done at all. But all of that territorial stuff boils down to the Ukrainians admitting to what is already a reality on the ground, that they lost this territory and they're never going to get it back. So again, the devil's in the details. Having said all that doesn't mean in a few minutes we're going to have an agreement. There will be a lot of head knocking to get there.
I fear that what's happening as we speak is, of course, more territory is being conquered by the Russians. And the theory of what you've said is that what they've got, they'll be able to keep. And what they haven't got is, I guess, negotiable. And that's sort of standard Kremlin practice. Let me ask you about one piece of what the Russians have been doing, Sam, that's particularly worrying. You noted that it may not be a problem at the moment in Chernobyl, but the Russians are attacking nuclear power plants in Ukraine, putting some of them seems in great peril, possibly with the effect of unleashing radioactivity in the reactor vessels themselves, but at the very least, quite possibly setting up the conditions under which the cooling ponds in which they've stored their spent fuel rods on many of these facilities may cook off, releasing enormous amounts of radioactivity into the air and perhaps the waters nearby. How serious how serious a problem would you say that is, Sam? And what is the likelihood it will eventuate?
Well, it is a major problem. It is a real world, God's honest problem, right? Reactors are not going to blow up and like mushroom clouds, but they can melt down. And the spent fuel pools, most people don't focus on those, but if anything, that is the biggest threat in any of these facilities. You've got these huge, giant, very deep pools of water with pumps circulating the water, kind of like in a radiator in a car. And you have these spent fuel rods in there that generate incredible amounts of heat for a very long time. They gradually, if you will, sort of cool down, but especially initially, if that water's not circulating, you don't have those pumps moving, they will get so hot they will evaporate the water. They will boil the pools. They will uncover, and when they do, they will catch fire. And one way or the other, you will have a plume of some of the most dangerous radioactive isotopes on Earth, including things like cesium-137, going up in the atmosphere and drifting whichever way the prevailing wind takes them. And things like cesium-137, that's the kind of stuff that people think about when they think about radioactivity. That's the kind of stuff that just kills you really quickly and in horrible, horrible ways.
And they can also, those radioactive isotopes contaminate the soil, as I understand it, for protracted
Absolutely.
periods of time, making them essentially
Absolutely.
uninhabitable. Sam, what's a particular concern, of course, is that this is a problem over there, but it could well be a problem here as well. And our Secure the Grid Coalition has been working for years trying to get the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of the United States to act on a petition that was initially submitted by one of our colleagues, Tom Popick, 11 years ago, to put into place in all of the nuclear facilities across the country that have these spent fuel ponds means of providing emergency power to cooling mechanisms that will keep those things, their fuel rods, from cooking off here with the kind of devastating effect that you've just described. The NRC has not done anything about this for 11 years, amazingly enough. And we've put up an Align Act campaign at securethegrid.com, our website for that coalition, urging people to sign it and express their strong urging to both the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, President, and the Congress to get in place means of providing resilient and cost-effective power in emergency situations like a grid down that could have, as I say, these knock-on effects. Sam, let me ask you quickly about another piece of the problem that we're confronting in the world at the moment, and that is the prospect that the Biden administration is going to conclude a new deal with the mullahs of Iran. Tell us what that deal apparently looks like, and do you think it's going to materialize? And if so, what will the consequences be, do you think?
I think the odds are very great that you are going to see a disastrous deal very soon under this administration. The only thing that I guess there's some outside hope that there will be enough outrage and pressure that even they will feel compelled to step back from it. But certainly they want to sign a disastrous deal, and that is what they're negotiating. What does it involve? I mean, it involves releasing the Iranians from sanctions, including not just the sanctions narrowly aimed at nuclear stuff, but releasing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps from sanctions and a whole raft of individual Iranians from sanctions, and handing them billions of dollars to go buy weapons and set the Middle East on fire. I mean, it's a gift to the mad Ayatollahs is what this deal is, and that's exactly what's being hammered together right now.
Sam, we have to take a short break. We're going to come back and continue this conversation, especially about what Israel may do about this deal and what flows from it. We'll be right back with more with Sam Faddis right after this. Welcome back. I'm very pleased to say welcome once again to Sam Faddis. We're going to continue our conversation with him about some of the really important national security challenges we're facing at the moment as we try to protect this country we love. Sam, we were talking about what Iran is up to, the mistake the Biden team seems determined to make that will advance their nuclear ambitions, not stop them. Israel has made it absolutely clear they regard a nuclear Iran as an existential threat, and they've absolutely right to do so. What is your analysis of the likelihood that if the Iranians don't use a nuclear weapon against Israel first, Israel will act one way or the other to stop them from having that capability?
I think it is very clear the Israelis will do whatever they have to do to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. So they may start with whatever range of options, which presumably are conventional. But in the end, the only thing that matters is Iran can't have a nuke. People need to understand Israel may be very potent and sophisticated militarily relative to the other countries in the area. Doesn't change the fact it is a very small nation. The impact of even a handful, even a couple of nuclear weapons on Israeli soil, particularly if they're ground bursts and throw up fallout, ends the existence of the state of Israel. They don't have a fallback position. They can't absorb nuclear strikes and then retaliate, as was often the case, in U.S. planning. They this is this isn't literally, in the ultimate definition of the word, an existential threat to them, and they will do whatever they're going to do. So whatever they have to do. So Biden can play whatever games he plays based on a mix of incompetence, malfeasance, and everything else. The Israelis will ultimately just do on their own.
Sam, you've spent much of your life, of course, in the intelligence business. The U.S. intelligence would almost certainly have some situational awareness, as they say, about any steps the Israelis might take to neutralize this Iranian capability. What's your speculation as to whether the U.S. government would, well, perhaps give the Iranians a heads up that the Israelis are coming, or worse yet, actually interfere with a strike on the folks that the Biden team seems so enamored of in Iran?
Well, look, this administration has already effectively interfered with Israel because they've delayed providing them with refueling, mid-air refueling tankers that the Israelis need in order to effectively project power over Iran. So they've held up delivery of those aircraft, which prevents Israel from employing a lot of the capabilities it has. Once upon a time, I would have said that the idea that an American administration would warn Iran that Israel was about to strike them was insane. But on the other hand, we've got senior U.S. generals who've told us in the recent past that they would call the Chinese and warn them if we were getting ready to attack them. So I can't say that that's impossible. It might very well happen.
It's so alarming on so many different levels for those of us, particularly who believe Israel is among, if not the most important of our allies, that
Absolutely.
it would put perhaps at risk the very existence of the Israeli state is unbelievable to me. But I think you're right to be concerned on it. Sam, let me turn to something else that you've covered recently at End Magazine, which is the Taliban's return to jihad. Not a surprise, it's what they do, but how are they doing it? And are they likely to be using the $85 billion, I think, worth of advanced military equipment we left behind in furtherance of that effort?
Well, one way or the other, they're going to use the military equipment, right? They're either going to put it to use where it makes sense for them, given what they're intending to do, or they're just going to sell it and to people like the Iranians and other folks, and then the cash. I mean, so they're going to convert it into a liquid asset that they can use to blow things up and kill people. We've created a terrorist superstate in Afghanistan. Nothing about the Taliban has changed. Every terrorist group on earth practically is active and has a training camp in Afghanistan. That's the brutal reality. There was just a huge bombing in a mosque in Peshawar, Pakistan, which is just barely on the other side of the border from Afghanistan, Shiite mosque. And of course, ISIS-K was used as, they claimed this attack. Okay, this is This is a charade. The Taliban and the Haqqanis have for a long time been cooperating with ISIS-K and using ISIS-K as essentially a means of denying complicity in killing people. We know that, the United Nations knows that, everybody on the planet knows that. The Taliban keeps telling the same lie, and this administration picks up and repeats that lie. Why? Because it allows them to claim that somehow or another the Taliban have changed. They're kinder and gentler now. They're not really a threat, and they're actually working with us now in this insane world that we're now in. It is not true, and we know it's not true, and our intelligence community knows it's not true.
Sam, you spent a lot of time in Pakistan. The last time I checked, the Pakistani government was a sponsor of, an enabler of, a protector of the Taliban. Why would the Taliban be going after the hand that has fed them for so long?
Well, because it is undeniably true that the Pakistanis have supported the Taliban and actually worked against us throughout the entire Afghan war. That's fact. But that doesn't mean that the current existing situation in Pakistan or that government is what the Taliban wants. I mean, the Taliban wants a caliphate. They want a true Islamic caliphate. Some of the Pakistani officials, are on board with that and are sympathizers and actively support them. Some of them have thought they can kind of play with fire like this and dance along the edge of this problem, but the fire will never come home. Well, too bad. It is coming home. I mean, the Taliban does not intend to sit inside those borders and just have their little Islamic paradise. They are waging jihad. They want a worldwide caliphate. It's never changed.
And sadly, one of the things that they would benefit from hugely, obviously, if they were able to topple the government of Pakistan, would presumably be adding to their kit of advanced weapons with nuclear ones from the large and growing Pakistani arsenal. A terrifying prospect. Sam, let me turn quickly to one other thing that the Biden administration seems to have been lying about, according to your reporting at And Magazine. COVID. The president's taking credit for it now having been defeated. What's going on here, and what are the implications of what we're being told by not just the Biden political team, but also by Tony Fauci, the FDA, the Centers for Disease Control, and so on?
I think the short version, in the interest of time, is that we were lied to about effectively everything regarding COVID, from where it originated and Fauci's involvement in that, and it very probably is the product of actual genetic engineering. We've been lied to over the course of at least 2 years, right? Now, for political purposes, this administration kind of wants to back away and just sort of say nothing to see here. What is absent, of course, from this discussion is any accountability for what just happened. You've lied to us and done all these things for 2 years, and now you're just basically telling us, forget about it and move on, but no accountability. And the biggest part of that is no guarantee that the true agenda, things like the Chinese social credit system, which they've pushed so hard, is really being abandoned. Sort of like, okay, we didn't get quite there this time, but you turn around in 5 minutes and find that there is another effort to go exactly the same direction on some other pretext.
That's a particularly frightening prospect, of course, in the run-up to an election, where we might see this stuff kicking in, or possibly you see it kicking in after the election, when it is once again the agenda of this government to use fear and use control mechanisms to try to dominate the American people and snuff their freedoms. And I think, as you say, Sam Faddis, insinuate into this country something akin to, if not virtually identical to, the Chinese techniques for exercising such control, the so-called social credit system. We'll be back with more on all of this with you, Sam, and I look forward to it. Thank you for your time today, my friend. Next up, we'll talk about energy security and insecurity with one of our country's leading experts and commentators on the subject, Jacki of The Jacki Daily Show. Welcome back, and a very special welcome to our next guest. Her name is Jacki from the Jacki Daily Show on the Blaze TV. She has served in a variety of capacities, however, that have helped inform the content of her excellent program on energy, notably her time in the United States Congress, working for a great member at the time, Trent Franks of Arizona. We're always delighted to have a chance to catch up with Jacki, especially in a moment like this when energy is really the subtext, the leitmotif, if you will, of the crisis in Ukraine. Jacki, welcome back. It's good to have you with us.
So good to be back with you always, Frank. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about what has really been now, I think, in front of the public eye in a way that hasn't generally been the case, namely the dangers associated with dependency for energy on hostile powers like Russia. This is true for the Europeans, particularly at the moment, but for us as well. Give us your thoughts as to what we've learned or should have learned in this episode.
I tell you what, I'm not sure how much we've learned. This has been one of the greatest moments in the past several decades for learning what is true and what we should be doing in terms of our energy policy. And so far, as per usual, people are taking away the wrong lessons. Germany, Senator Warren, Biden, Psaki, even the Texas leadership. Um, I'll put it this way: never before have we had the dangers of having the supply chain, and energy is at the top of it. It is the input for everything. Absolutely everything you buy is influenced by the price of oil or gas or coal or nuclear. And so, after what happened with COVID, not having drugs, not having basic things we need and controlled by other countries, you think we'd learned. And now this. Never have we had a better illustration of why you don't make yourself vulnerable and dependent upon countries that don't share your values, that are adversarial, that might even be enemies. And so, unfortunately, I'm seeing people go in the other direction. What we should be doing, and we'll get to that, I know, in the next segment, is being more dependent on ourselves. And people instinctively know that. Yet, and the good news is we can. We have the goods. We have what we need here. But what's
That's
happening
one of the things
instead?
that,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I want to make sure we really drill down on is the alternatives to the present arrangement. But let's just take a minute to talk about Europe and how it's gotten itself into a really perilous situation in terms of its dependency on the country that's invading Ukraine, namely Russia.
Yeah. So Europe has spent the last 2.5 decades plunging itself into reliance on wind and solar energy. More and more, what they call the energy transition, which they think is inevitable. Well, as a result, they have passed fracking bans, for example, in Germany and other countries. They have shut down their coal plants. They've shut down their nuclear plants. And I mean, just recently, even. And they have doubled their reliance on Russia. So, Russia already was supplying 100% of the natural gas for the Baltic states, for Finland, about 40% for Germany. And then, after the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was approved, and your president was responsible for that, helping that happen. Europe will have its reliance and its capacity doubled, its reliance on Russia. That's exactly the wrong direction. Why on earth you would choose to slice your own throat and make yourself reliant? I mean, people are asking Europe and Germany to stand up to Russia. How can they? And they are 100% reliant on that country to run their military, what little bit of a military they have, to run their hospitals, to run their businesses, to run their homes, to run their schools. It's over. If Russia gets upset with Germany, they can turn them Amish overnight. And so people need to understand this. Like, Europe cannot really stand up to Russia. They're going to try. It will be
Well,
interesting.
they've been doing some of that, let's face it, but they've also been signaling that they're not going to go forward with the operation of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They haven't, as far as I can tell, said they're going to go off Russian gas and oil altogether because, for the reasons you've just described, they can't as a practical matter unless there are alternatives. And Jacki, I just wanted to ask you about two quickly. One is exports from the United States of energy. Are we in a position to do more of that, especially, I guess, liquefied natural gas? And what about this pipeline in the Eastern Mediterranean that you were speaking about? Joe Biden's help for the Nord Stream 2. He's not only stopped our own Keystone pipeline, but he's also opposed that of Israel that could have diversified gas resources for Europe. Talk about both of those, if you would, quickly.
Well, I mean, as far as the Israeli pipeline is concerned, that's a little bit more of a mystery in that the only theory I can insert to make sense of that is that he's aiding and abetting the competitors, which kind of makes sense. The Biden family has had major, big deals with foreign oil. So, Burisma being the most classic example of an oil and gas company that they profited from, and they're not the only ones. There are other US leaders whose kids have their hands in the pie. And then they have the big deal with China as well, which is also an oil and gas deal. So I never miss the opportunity to point out the Biden family posture is to aid and abet and boost the production of foreign oil and war against American oil producers, which are their number one competitors, and apparently now the Israelis too. So they're helping. Someone's winning in all this. We need to stop and ask who wins. When you destroy U.S. energy production, and they've done it 100 different ways, some of them very quiet in the agencies and in the courts, but every way they can. And now Senator Warren is proposing this windfall tax on oil. I mean, I don't know what could be worse. If you tax something, you get less of it. Do we want less oil production when gas prices are skyrocketing? None of it makes any sense if you're on our side.
Yeah, that's the key point, Jacki. It does make sense if you're kind of engaged in a wrecking operation against our country. And that's how I've concluded the Biden team, family, and administration have been operating now throughout this presidency. Jacki, let me turn to the money question, I guess, literally. Given the inadvisability of depending upon anybody, especially foreign adversaries, for vital energy needs, whether it's our own or whether it's Europe's, what should we be doing now to remedy the situation in which we now find ourselves in, partly thanks to previous decisions, again, by our European allies and by Joe Biden?
So Joe Biden should run to the microphone right now and make this announcement. As of this moment, given the current circumstances, the U.S. policy is as follows. We will be approving all pipelines as quickly as possible in the federal agencies. We expect the states to cooperate and do the same. We will be, extending permits and leases, not just the leases, also permits, so that people can drill now. We will be ending all ESG,
including on federal lands,
especially on federal lands, which is really the only ones that he controls completely. The states control a lot of it, actually. But he should say, we stop now inside the federal agencies all recognition of ESG investment criteria, which essentially is nothing more than calling for divestment from the U.S. oil patch. And it's trying to basically destroy and kill all fossil fuel production, which is impossible. I mean, 80% of the globe depends on fossil fuels to run, most certainly us. If he ran to the microphone and listed off this litany of all the pro-energy policies that we're going to starting now, and saying you get the full backing of the U.S. federal government, Wall Street, oil and gas producers, anyone else who needs to rely on knowing we're not going to destroy and wage war on you and pull the rug out from under you like we did the Keystone XL pipeline after billions and billions invested and years of environmental study and hundreds of meetings with state, local, federal, tribal authorities. The safest, most technologically advanced pipeline ever, probably on Earth, and they pulled the rug out. Who wants to invest in oil and gas production after the government attacks like that? He has to assure people it's not going to happen. Oil would drop $25 a barrel right now. right
So,
now.
Jacki, you're saying that there's plenty of capacity
Yes.
that could be ramped up if the environment in which people are making decisions, capital decisions, production decisions, is changed from basically the hostile environment that he created once he became president back to something akin to the very supportive environment that Donald Trump pursued?
So all Joe Biden has to do is get out of the way. That's it. I mean, American oil and gas producers will do the rest. There's hardly been more money to be made in oil and gas than right now. They would love to get out there and throw that money in, but they're not going to do it if they believe they'll only be stopped and lose their investment because of the US federal government, which is what's been happening. That's why they're not using all of these leases. It's part of the reason why. So we can reverse this. We don't have to live this way. We could be taking money out of Putin's pocket right now if those commodities prices tank.
Well, this couldn't be a more important message to send, and to send, as you say, Jacki, at this moment. We need all hands on deck providing for our energy security, and Joe Biden ought to, at the very least, get out of the way, but better yet, uh, clear the way for action. Jacki, thank you so much for your time. We'll look forward to talking with you about all of this further, and thanks for these updates. Next up, we'll speak with Hung Kao about what it means to be a foreign born American patriot right after this. Welcome back, and a very special welcome to our next guest. His name is Captain Hung Kao, United States Navy retired, a man that I am privileged to say I have just gotten to know in the past few weeks and have been enormously impressed by, not least because of an attribute that we feature on this program and that I think bears the greatest of attention on the part of the largest possible number of Americans. I call it the phenomenon of foreign born American patriots. Captain Cow, thank you so much for joining us here. It's terrific to have you with us, and I want to thank you both for your past service to our country in the uniform of the United States Navy, as well as your willingness to get into the arena now as a candidate for Congress in the 10th District of Virginia. Welcome, sir. It's good to have you with us.
No, thank you, Frank. This is what an honor to be on your show.
I want to start by talking about this, well, foreign born American patriot business. You have an extraordinary life story, not unique by any means, but one that really, I think, speaks to the point that I really try to make with this sort of characterization. Namely, you have an appreciation of what freedom is and why this is such an exceptional nation in the sense that it guarantees freedom. Talk a little bit about that against the backdrop of your own circumstances and experiences.
Well, thank you. So, at the age of 4, my family was allergic to lead, so we had to leave Vietnam pretty hastily. My father was the deputy minister of agriculture, so he was definitely on a hit list to be executed or sent to re-education camp. So my mom was sewing basically little notes into our clothes, into the hem of our clothes. This is my son. Please take care of him. Just a little money, and just in case we got separated. They had hard decisions to make. They had 5 children, and at one point, the word was, "Hey, you might only be able to bring 2 or maybe 3, but not 5." So they had to make that difficult choice of which kids do we leave behind. But thankfully, God looked after us, and we were all able to leave and get to Guam. And from Guam, we went to Camp Pendleton, and then a family that we knew sponsored us in the United States, and then brought us to Northern Virginia. Now, my father, again, being in agriculture, couldn't find any work over here, so the only work he could find was in Africa. So then I spent the next 7 years in West Africa, in Niger, and then traveling with him around in Zaire and Cameroon, and then later on in Madagascar. But just watching, the third world countries and how they appreciate little things in life like water, right? The basic necessities. And so I had a deep appreciation for that. But the biggest thing I always remember is what Ronald Reagan said. He said, you can go to France, you can go to Germany, and you can go to England, but you'll never be French, you'll never be German, and you'll never be British. I mean, they'll take your taxes and you can become a citizen, but anybody can come to the United States and be an American. And I truly believe that. And that's why I dedicated an entire career in the service of our country to repay a debt that my family could never possibly pay in 10 lifetimes.
Talk a little bit about your service, how it began, and the kind of work that you found yourself doing in the United States Navy.
Sir, I went to the United States Naval Academy and graduated, and then from there, I was one of 6 people to be selected for the Special Operations Program. So this is a lot different from Special Warfare. Special Warfare is the SEALs. Special Operations is deep sea diving and explosive ordnance disposal. Although we work hand in hand, the way firefighters work with EMTs. And so my job as a deep sea diver, I recovered planes and wreckages from the bottom of the ocean. I recovered John F. Kennedy Jr. I recovered the USS Monitor, which is the ironclad from the Civil War, and a few airplane crashes, as well as some of my friends that were pilots that crashed. It was really sad because we had dinner the night before on the carrier. They went back. They went off on a mission and never came back, and I was tasked to recover them. We did a lot of other things underwater as well. But as an explosive ordnance disposal technician, I defuse bombs. That's what we do, and we rendered things safe on the battlefield. I graduated from EOD school 2 days after 9/11, and so at the time they told us, IEDs, that's not something you have to worry about. But that was our fight for the last 20 years.
And you wound up serving on land, worrying about these kinds of problems, notably, I believe, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and also in Somalia. Is that right?
Yes, sir. So in Iraq, I commanded what's called the Combined Explosives Exploitation Cell, SEXI. So we were a forensics team that would go out with FBI, ATF agents, and EOD technicians from all services, and we would piece all the IEDs back together, see how they work, see how we can defend our troops against them, and also get the biometrics and DNA to find the perpetrators and take down the entire network. In Afghanistan, I was the director of counter improvised threats. So that was everything from IEDs to drones that we're seeing now in the Ukraine, and tunneling as well that we're seeing at the southern border.
Indeed. Among other things, you served back in Washington, as I understand it, working about, among other things, the budget of the United States Navy, which gave you, a very high altitude perspective on the challenges facing that service and indeed our military more generally. Is that right?
Yes, sir. So I had 2 tours in the Pentagon. The first one as a requirement officer, but the second one was in what we call the bullpen. That's where we program and budget the $140 billion budget. And it's definitely a very challenging job because you had to know there's a balance of everything that you do. If you take away one F-35, what does that mean for the economic water quantity? If you take away a squadron here or a ship there, how does that affect the entire budget? And so
it gave you a perspective on the subject that I want to turn to next, which is the condition of the only military that we have at the moment, and what seems to me to be kind of a wrecking operation that is being perpetrated against it, among other aspects of our country, by the Joe Biden administration, and what that means, particularly for, among others, the special operator community that you served in so gallantly, and therefore the warfighting capabilities and the deterrent capacity of our armed forces in a very dangerous world. We talk about it a lot here. It's clearly getting to be more dangerous by the day, and all the more important, therefore, that we actually have a military that is not degraded, that is not demoralized, and that is capable of performing the vital mission that you, among others, have performed in the past. Captain Hung Cao, we so appreciate your time. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be right back. back. We're continuing a conversation with a remarkable military officer, now retired, Captain Hung Kao, United States Navy, retired. A special operator when he was in uniform, performing some very remarkable underwater feats in particular, but doing so at great personal risk and cost, as it turns out, as well as to his family, of course, in the service of the country that he came to as an adopted nation and appreciates remarkably well. Captain, I do want to talk with you about how your life story and experiences have informed your assessment of where we are today. You've just published a very important piece in the Washington Examiner called Biden's Fourth Strike or Four Strikes. Talk a little bit about the nature of the United States military at the moment and the pressures that it's under from the Biden team.
Yes, sir. So when I went to the Pentagon for that tour, the bullpen, we had ships that couldn't get underway, aircrafts that couldn't fly, and submarines that couldn't dive, which is a bad thing when you're looking at this great power competition. The last administration worked really hard to fix all that, and then when this administration came in, the focus was no longer on military preparedness. It was more about making sure they understood the root cause of white rage or whatever it was General Milley said, and we basically um, crippled our military looking at things that we should not be looking at. We're basically dividing the military and saying, hey, these guys are privileged and these guys are not, and that's not true. In combat, I don't care what you look like, what your gender is, what your orientation is. I just care that you got my back and you can shoot straight. And that's what I think we've lost the sight of is, our country's motto is e pluribus unum, out of many one. And that's how we've led our troops, is that, we're one unit, we fight for one cause. But now the infighting between our service members that's caused really by leadership is I don't know how we're going to fix
This is the question, I guess, that I wanted to get into with you. This is a function of, I believe, a Maoist doctrine for dividing and conquering nations like ours, not on class warfare lines in this case, but on race lines. And you're a member of an Asian minority population, so you have, I assume, as good a vision of whether this is a systemically racist country as we are told, and if not, whether what's being done is simply inflicting incredible harm on, as I say, the only military we have, and rendering it less capable of fighting the nation's wars. How do you assess that?
you know I came here I didn't learn English till I was 12. And then I went to the number one high school in the United States, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. I went to the Naval Academy. I went to postgraduate school. I have a master's in physics. Then I went to Harvard and MIT. I'm also a Navy captain. So, it's just hard for me to understand where I was held back. I know I had a discussion last night with the NAACP chapter here, and they were pushing the critical race theory. And I said, well, you have to stop dividing us. And there's things where they say military kids are privileged, and I don't agree with it, because my kids are definitely not privileged. They've had to move every 18 months. I left my wife when she was 8 months pregnant with our very first child, and not knowing if I was coming back because we were invading Iraq. I had to write him little letters, for all his milestones in his life in case I was killed. And that's not a privileged life. And so when we try to look at different ways to split the United States, these guys are privileged, these guys are not, we start fracturing the fabric of what we are, which is like we are a melting pot. We're just a hodgepodge of different diversities and diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And that's what we need to really concentrate on, is like, hey, I think a little differently from you. And so I have a better idea on this, how to attack this problem or this objective. And that's what we need to concentrate on in the
Sadly,
military.
it's not just the critical race theory, indoctrination, and well, the purges that have been taking place by people who, don't exactly embrace it, but also the vaccine mandates now. And in that SEAL community you referred to earlier, we've seen court cases going forward in which the Navy's efforts to purge some of these incredibly highly skilled and highly trained, arguably irreplaceable, uh, servicemen is just, I gather, doing real harm to the fighting trim of those units. Talk, if you would, very quickly, Captain Cow, about what happens when you pull out of these elite units, a single individual or even several, perhaps. Can they maintain the kind of unit cohesiveness that's required for them to perform their mission?
So this is, I think, the biggest Christian purge in the military. I mean, most of these guys are putting in for religious exemptions, which are completely denied. Every single one has been denied, and so you know, and you're looking at their background. Well, they're all Christians, and so we're purging about 13,000 people from the military who believe the same thing. All senior officers or senior enlisted, and that is a problem with our readiness, because these are the people that have been in the teams for a long time, and it takes a while for a team to work and meld together. And now you're pulling a guy out because he refuses to get vaccinated, even though they already have natural immunity from having
Right.
COVID before.
So, very quickly, 30 seconds, your uh, prescription for restoring America greatness and why you're running for Congress, for that matter.
Yes, sir. We need to heal this nation by bringing us all together. Stop looking at things that split us apart, but look at all the things that bring us together. And as the greatest nation in the world, where we invented the light bulb, the automobile, the plane, we put a man on the moon, we invented the telephone, the radio, we can do all these things. And so that's why I'm running for Congress. I believe that myself and all the patriots that are running with me want to unite this country the way we united our forces in combat, to look for a common goal so we can strive.
Thanks, and best of luck, Captain Cow. And thanks to you for watching this edition of Securing America. I hope you feel better equipped to join us in doing just that. And for more about how you can, visit our website, securingamerica.tv, and then go forth and multiply.